This regular meeting of the Board of Trustees is being held Tuesday, June the 15th. The meeting is being called to order at the time is 6:01. Everyone, please join me at the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 3, Interim Superintendent's comments.
Good evening, Board President Morales and members of the board, audience here present. It is an honor to present student and staff honors for this month. Normally, at our board meetings, we honor outstanding Team SISD students and staff who have earned local, regional, or national accolades and recognition. Tonight, we recognize our students and staff who have earned recent honors, and we have posted an article on our website along with an animated presentation. We also are sharing it on our district social media accounts. This month, we are honoring 3 students for winning the regional Month of the Military Child Art Contest. They are Caitlin Agapay from Lujan Chavez Elementary, Farah M. Daly from John Drugan School, and Jocelyn Rodela from Socorro High School. We are also honoring the El Dorado and Montwood High School varsity baseball teams for winning the 2020 and 2021 UIL championships. The El Dorado, Montwood, and America's High School varsity softball teams for winning the 2021 UIL championships as well. Again, we ask that our community view the recognitions online and like and share the posts so that everyone can help celebrate their achievements. That concludes our comments, our recognitions for this evening. I do want to take this opportunity to express our appreciation to everyone who worked the graduations, who attended and supported and celebrated with their students. All the events went very well. So I'm very happy to report that. Also, our summer break, just to let everyone know that the district will be closed from June the 28th through July the 5th. So this concludes my comments, Mr. Morales.
Thank you.
Mr. Morales.
At this time, Mr. Varela has
Yes. I just want to make the public aware that Mr. Ianton and I were communicating, and I did receive some calls from constituents regarding Socorro High School that it's going to be demolished. They wanted to do one final walkthrough. So thank you, Mr. Ianton, for making that happen. And it will be this Saturday from 9 to 12. So anybody who's a high school, Socorro High School alumni, feel free to stop by at that time. Just be aware that the ACs may not be working. They may be working, but because they're going to get ready to demolish it. So, just to have that final walkthrough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Varela. Item 4, open forum. We greatly appreciate those individuals who have requested to speak to the board during open forum in regards to specific agenda item. We are bound by certain time constraints in order to cover all the items on the agenda and therefore must limit presentations to 5 minutes. Please respect the rights of others in your presentation. By law, the board cannot take action upon or discuss any item which is not posted on tonight's agenda, but we will give all presentations our serious consideration. Thank you. Let's proceed to open forum. Our first speaker is Rene Rodriguez. I believe he has 2 items that he'll discuss. We'll permit him to go ahead and cover both of them.
President, board, thank you for allowing me to have this time to address you guys. I have a concern about my children. One of my child goes to this school, has to sign in, and when she signs in,
she has to take and asks if she has taken the COVID vaccine. Okay, that's medical. So I don't know if you're aware about the HIPAA laws. Okay, so you either need to address that or change that, because as a parent, I don't like for you to talk to my children, ask them questions about their medical. Okay? The other thing is my daughter goes to high school. And the other issue I have is that she didn't pass one of her tests. So she's going to class right now. She has to go Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Tomorrow's her last day. It's supposed to be from 8 to 11. Yesterday she went, got there at 8:15 because she didn't know where to go. So for 15 minutes she was lost. She found her place at 8:15. She says, Daddy, I'm in class. Perfect. Then she says after 20 minutes, she got a 40-minute recess. Okay? After 20 minutes of lessons. Then she comes back. They give her a little bit more of a lesson. And by 10, she called my wife to get picked up. She was supposed to get 3 hours. Today, she gets there at 8 because she already knows where she needs to go. And she was sent home at 9:30. Okay? This is a child, my child, that didn't pass her test. She needs tutoring. And what kind of tutoring you're providing when she's not getting her 3 hours that she needs to? Okay? On top of that, it's Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. My question is, why in the hell is she going to take her test next week on Thursday? You're giving her 7 days of doing absolutely nothing. Then what is she going to learn? What is she going to absorb? That needs to change. That needs to be addressed. That is ridiculous. Never, I've been in high school. I went and I got my bachelor's. We always studied and took our test. They never said, oh, we'll see you next week. Come on. My child has already missed a year. You think that they're okay? No, they're not. I bought both my children desks, computers, okay, before you guys supplied them. I got them lights, chairs. But where do they study? In their beds. And I come from work, try to check up on them. And that's where I'm like, hey, you're not learning, get up. Put that desk to work. Okay? That's how we're teaching our children. Okay? And I'm just a parent that, by God, thank God that God provided me the knowledge to have my own company, that I can take the time to go and check up on my children. But what about the thousands of parents that don't have that ability? Okay? Help our kids pass their tests. It is not sufficient to what you guys are providing. Okay? The other issue, got a minute left. The other issue, because I got a bunch of issues, but the same issue is this. You want to do a survey? I don't know who the hell is doing those surveys. Okay? When you give us a survey and you ask for our opinion, okay, let us give you our opinion. Don't force us to choose. If there's 5 items, don't force us to choose 3, okay? Because that's not our opinion. Because I only wanted one thing. There's another item that has 7 things there. I only picked 2. Why are you asking me for 4? You want to know why? Because I'm an educated man. And I understand that I can sway all of these to say, well, I can give these 3 to this parent, but I'm pretty sure that I make them forced to get a 4th one. I'm going to get what I want as a district. Okay? It is skewed, it is incorrect, and it is improper. We cannot submit those surveys, not even my opinion, because I have to do what you guys are asking me to and plug in the 3rd and the 4th. So my thing is, that needs to change. Your surveys are crap. That needs to change. And stop asking my children for their medical things, okay? Because that's against HIPAA law. And that needs to be corrected, okay? because I do have the means. I do have the means.
Ms. Carmona, can we address this gentleman's issues immediately
Yes, sir.
by this Friday?
Do I say the other one? Oh, do.
You're on. Go ahead. I
Okay.
made that. Go ahead.
Sorry. Okay. Like I said, I'm a dad. We're all parents here. Okay? We should all be worried about what quality they're providing our kids. I know some of you are educators. Educate. Okay? That's all I want. I want the best for my district. Work together and give us the best for our children. Because don't forget, we're going to be old, and who's going to take care of us? These children. These are our future. The other issues that I have is that I've been told by a lot of teachers where my youngest is going to go to next year. I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but when I hear that, you know what, our police department threw, something under the bus, it worries me. We saw it in Canotillo right now where they're reporting about it. We need an audit for our police department as well. Because when you have in the adult restroom drugs, they're reported and nothing's been done, there's an issue. And especially when my kid's gonna go to that school. Those are things. You have a policy, a drug policy at that. There's a thing as open records request. 10 days, you're gonna have to give me that information because I am gonna come on Monday. And I'm gonna request that. How many drug tests have you guys provided? It's just that simple. Who's doing those drugs? Because I don't wanna think that it's a teacher or maybe a custodian, God knows who. I just don't wanna blame anybody, but those are genuine concerns, especially when my child is gonna go to that school. We need to address these. Everybody is scared in this school system. Why? Because they're scared of retaliation. We said it all along. Whispers in the hallways. Whispers out when you're in gatherings. People talk. People talk because they're scared. We had elections. Change was made because we understand as parents we need a change. We need somebody to work it. We're asking to work together. Bring those changes that we are asking for. I'm a parent with genuine concerns about my children, education. I'm afraid of what's going to happen if somebody, God forbid, does drugs and not in the right mind and hurt my child. Because I won't leave it alone. Because I have the means. So please, work together, change policies. Make this work environment better for your staff. And I'm talking from the top to the bottom, so that they can be well prepared, so that my child, my children, and everybody else in this room's children can have the education that we deserve and that we're paying for. I'm sorry to say this. I know some of you, I'm going to throw anybody under the bus, like I said. It was easy for me to just pick up the phone and say, hey, this. But you know what? You're all elected. You as the board can do it. Not one of you, or you. All of you collective. That's why I came here to tell you and address you these issues. Please, I'm begging you. My child, I don't see my child for the whole day. You guys do. You guys take care of my children. Your teacher knows my child more than what I know my child because they're here most of the day. Give them the tools necessary to provide the best quality of service that you guys can give to your teachers so that they can provide it to my children and our children. Because as a father, I have to look for what my child's best interest is and yours as well. Because it's not fair just to be selfish and say, oh, just mine. No, I'm talking about everybody else's too. Those are concerns. Please. Sorry, I had the alarm. Please, I implore you, work together, change these policies. Make sure that you need to look and to make sure that your teachers are fit for the job. You need to stop skewing these surveys that you're doing and stop asking my children for their medical stuff, please. Please. I need that to resolve. Okay? I hate threatening people. I'm not threatening you guys. I'm asking you and imploring you. Change them. Change your policies. Thank you for paying attention to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you.
Mr. Morales.
Sure.
I just want to see if we can address these concerns or have some type of information by Friday.
Mhm.
Carmona, we'll go ahead and look through those. Our next speaker is Craig Patton. Craig Patton.
Bring us a presentation?
Good evening. I have resided in this school district for 34 years. 14 of those years I served on this board. Dr. Jose Espinosa was and is a very good superintendent. I would dare say he's one of the best superintendents we've ever had. Certainly one of the longest serving superintendents we've had. And I've seen a lot of superintendents in my 14 years. I was on the board from 93 to 96, 96 to 99, and again from 2002 to 2013. I served with 6 superintendents. Not interims, 6 permanent superintendents. From 2002 to 2012, I participated in 4 different superintendent searches. 4 in the space of 10 or 11 years. So I know when I see good superintendents. I know that good superintendents are hard to come by. Dr. Espinosa, when he left this district on May 5th, this board on May 5th issued a joint statement of the board and Jose Espinosa, and in that joint statement, it sets out at length some of his accomplishments and some of the achievements of this school district during his tenure. And I'd like to read that document, some of those achievements. So bear with me. During Dr. Espinosa's tenure, SISD's student performance has consistently increased over the last 9 years. In May 2012, and he came in September 2012, in May 2012, the district was behind the state in 9 out of the 17 STAR exams for students in grades 3 through 8. Flash forward to the present day, SISD students have now outscored the Texas passing rates in all 17 STAR exams in grades 3 through 8 for 6 consecutive years. Under Dr. Espinosa's leadership, the district is the largest school district in the state of Texas to earn both the state's top honors, including an A grade and the prestigious post-secondary readiness distinction designation. Socorro ISD is the only district to reach this milestone in a pool of the largest 25 school districts in the state, while notably serving over 90% minority students and over 70% economically disadvantaged students. During Dr. Espinosa's tenure, Socorro ISD became the first district in a non-HEB market to earn the coveted HEB Excellence in Education Award for Outstanding Large District. The district earned an $800,000 W.K. Kellogg Foundation grant for the nationally recognized WIN Academy that he launched to support vulnerable children in the district, and won a $300,000 Raise Your Hand Texas Blended Learners Grant due to the district's success in building blended learning environments for students. Dr. Espinosa created the WIN Academy to close the achievement gaps and invest in our vulnerable students, initiated Operation College Bound to ensure all students had a path to college, including establishing new early college high schools at every one of our comprehensive high schools in the district. And he paved the path for successful blended learning and to ensure the highest standards of accountability, creating a first ever and first of its kind academic internal audit system to trust but verify our district's compliance with the state and federal regulations. He led the formation and passage of a $448 million bond in 2017 to improve aging facilities, including the reconstruction of Socorro High School and to keep up with community growth. Other employee professional growth opportunities that Dr. Espinosa championed included the nationally recognized Building Friends for the Future new teacher mentor program, in which new teachers are paired with veteran teachers to ensure a great start to their profession. The Grow Your Own grant that allows instructional aides to earn their bachelor's degrees and certification to transition into full-time teaching roles, a partnership with UTEP, in which our teachers and staff are provided with the opportunity to get their master's and doctoral degrees in the comfort of our own district facilities. And a TEA principal residency grant that gives SISD teachers an innovative opportunity to participate in the Texas Tech Principal Fellows Program. And when the IDEA Charter School Network opened its 4 new campuses near SISD boundaries, Dr. Espinosa launched a fierce and passionate team approach to educating our parents on differences between our public school district and charter schools, modeling his data-driven approach after Jaime Escalante. He coordinated the Stand and Deliver certification, the Stand and Deliver walkathon, in which about 300 employees visited nearly 10,000 homes to inform parents about why SISD was the right choice for endless opportunities. Dr. Espinosa won a 2019 Texas Public Relations Association Best in Writing category award for his editorial, What the Public Isn't Told About Charter's 100% College Acceptance Rates. These were some of the accomplishments of Dr. Espinosa and the school district during his tenure. He did a great job. And I think it's pretty darn impressive, all of those accomplishments. Pretty darn impressive. Served this district almost 9 years. And in light of all that, frankly, it begs the question, and probably more accurately, it screams the question, why isn't Dr. Jose Espinosa no longer the superintendent of Socorro ISD? I think what happened on May 5th in this boardroom when he was let go was an absolute travesty. Travesty. And I think my time is running out. So I won't answer that question as to exactly why he was let go until the next board meeting in July, in which I will appear before you and tell you, the board, the audience, whoever's listening, exactly why Dr. Jose Espinosa, one of the best superintendents Socorro ISD has ever seen, was let go. Because I know he wanted to continue serving this district. He had 2 young children in elementary school. I think the youngest was in 2nd grade. I have no doubt if he had been allowed, he would have continued to serve this district well until that youngest child graduated from high school. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patton. Our next speaker is Mr. Tommy Hill. You want to speak to the agenda item? Okay, you were signed up as a speaker at the open forum. Okay, thank you. We're going to go ahead and proceed into item number 5, public hearings. Item A, Every Student Succeeds Acts, ESSA public notice meeting. Our presenter is going to be Dr. Adam Starkey.
Good evening, President Morales, members of the board, and Mrs. Carmona. It's my pleasure to come before you all tonight once again to go over our ESSA, which is Every Student Succeeds Act, programs and plan for our 2021-2022 school year. ESSA stands, of course, for Every Student Succeeds Act. And it is the latest, actually the 8th reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, which is reauthorized every several years to meet current needs and to add to current areas of interest from the federal government. Since LBJ signed that in '65, the first goal was always to close the achievement gap for students who have economic disadvantages. Okay, so that was part of the war on poverty, part of the Great Society, for those of you all that might be historians like me. Okay, and it's most associated with Title I Part A for that reason, because of the economic disadvantaged component, but it's also relevant to other grant titles that have developed over the years. Okay, so this is just a little timeline. Okay, again, it started in '65 with the economic disadvantage, and then you can just kind of look. I won't read it all, but some of the presidents and some of the time periods that were watershed that has brought us to where we are today in terms of how we can leverage ESEA federal funding to support our students. Okay. Today, Socorro ISD draws funding from 5 major titles. We don't qualify to receive a couple. One is a rural cooperative, and our district has been very urbanized for quite some time. Okay, the other is like Title I Part D. We don't qualify for that, although we do have the Schaefer House. We don't have enough people. We do serve them, but there aren't enough people enrolled there to get the grant money, so we have to use some other money for that one. But the 5 that we do get, we have our Title I Part A, which is improving basic programs. We have Title I Part C, which is our migrant education program. Title II Part A is to prepare, train, recruit high-quality teachers, principals, other school leaders. Title III Part A, which is your supplemental English language acquisition, enrichment, enhancement. And Title IV is student support and academic enrichment. So all 5 of these are under one umbrella, which is ESEA, but they all work a little bit differently. Some of that might look self-explanatory. Just going to go ahead and go through those. First, these are our funding planning amounts that we have for the 2021-22 school year. Title I Part A always is the biggest, okay? And that's based on our economically disadvantaged count. Then we have our migrant funding, which is normally the smallest. Title II, Title III, those are similar. And then Title IV is a little bit smaller than those. And so our ESSA Hall, okay, for federal support, This year, under those titles, is a little bit more than $16 million, which will be allowed to be spent on July, technically 1st, but I guess 6th, since that's when we're coming back. Okay, so if we go to a couple of these charts, we have Title I, Part A, which is improving basic programs. We have to make sure that 70% of that goes directly to the campuses, so the principals have their own budgets for those. We develop those, and we go ahead and have them have their plan on that. And then there are some other things here. We have our parental involvement. I want to say that the set aside you actually have to have for parental involvement is just less than 1%, but since we pay for the parent liaisons and we pay for a lot of CIS coordinators at this level, we exceed that by far. So we have over 11% in that, and those positions funnel straight to the schools. And then if we look at that black color there where we talk about like the Read 180, Eduphoria, Plan for Learning, iStation, all of those things, that's about another $1 million in programs that goes out into the schools. So really it's 70% where they develop their own budget, probably about 90 actually gets there. Then you have your indirect cost, and then we've got a little bit of staffing up here, but that is also for program support district-wide. So we want to make sure that every dollar, in the other funds too, but in this one, we want to make sure that all of this, even though it says 70% goes to the schools, we have our plans set to where we try to get all of that down to our children. Okay, so I won't go through all of these, but these are the examples of the allocations that we get based on Title I, Part A. So if we were saying, okay, each campus can develop a budget, and we've gone through that. It's based on economically disadvantaged, so you have your high schools there, and it's based there, so they have larger amounts because they have larger schools. Middle schools, it's a little bit less because they're a little bit smaller, but some of those amounts are, for the actual size of the school, are fairly large, depending on how many economically disadvantaged students may be, of the socioeconomic status may be enrolled there. These are our 5 pre-K-8s. They're various, depending. And then we have one section right here of our, the elementary schools. Then we have our other section of our elementary schools. So of this $12.4 million, we have $8.8 million funneling into the schools directly by the rules so they can have their budgets. And this greatly, it is meant to supplement the general fund. And I'm saying equalizer, like the Equalizer movies, I mean, you don't want to say that it actually like equalizes it entirely, but Title I money takes the general fund and supplements it and allows for many more opportunities that we are able to provide for our kids at the campus level with this. Okay. So now Title I Part C, we have our Migrant Program, our Migrant Education Program. We are there with that. It's strictly for our students who are receiving services because they have been identified as being migratory in nature, and we want them to succeed. We want them to move on to post-secondary education. A lot of them are mobile. A lot of them have barriers that they need to overcome that are somewhat unique, and we are fortunate I have to say that as the district continues to urbanize and we see less mobility, we still are able to get some funding to serve the students who are migrant, who do remain. And so with that one, largely payroll because we have our new generation, that's a system, a compliance system. We have a migrant education program clerk. She goes out, she's like a family liaison, and she goes out and recruits, and she is our connector. I'll say that I've made home visits myself, but she knows where every last one of them live. She's very essential. And we also offer some temporary instructional aides that are specific to the students who are migrant to give them individual help. And we also do a little bit of teacher extra duty where we can find the money where we can get a little bit of extra tutoring after school at the places where there are a few more And then we just have a little bit left after that for some instructional supplies that are just for them. Little bit of technology, not as much as we used to, and a little bit of community outreach, which I had mentioned before. Title II, and both of those programs, I administer those. Title II, Part A is with Ms. Borrego and Adalberto Garcia, but I can speak to that also. That's on increasing student academic achievement, making sure that teachers, principals, and other school leaders have better quality, more effective, and be able to have people who are in the more disadvantaged areas get access to people who are more ready to lead. One of the biggest things that we use with this is instructional support, supplemental in nature, of course, where we have 9 instructional officers who are in elementary and the secondary areas and in all of the core areas. We also have an administrative specialist who helps them, but the instructional officers are a huge driver in our curriculum and instruction department because they go out and they help teachers. They go out and they help principals. They're in the schools all the time. They do lots of professional development with them. We've got a little bit reference there. They do stuff on Saturdays. And it's all about trying to make people better, give them more skills, give them more understanding so they can help to make students better in the classroom. Right. Title III is the English language acquisition, and that is run by my colleague, Veronica Reyes, the Director of Bilingual Education. And I always say on this one, all of these are supplemental programs. Title IIIA is supplemental on supplemental, because you have like your general basic, and then there's actually a state bilingual fund that Mr. Ressa and Mrs. Olson allocate. And then after this is a federal one that comes even after that. So it's really narrowed to making sure that that we have innovative and very narrowed approach to our English language learners to help them to continue to get proficiency in all subjects as well as the English language. We have instructional aides who assist with Title III. In Title III, they're funded. They assist with instruction for students who are ELs in the schools. There is extra duty because we have summer academies. There's also professional development. Instructional materials and technology is another thing because it goes straight to the EL students in this program, so it takes on quite a bit. And so that's specifically for them. Title IV is the last one. That's student support and academic enrichment. We talk about safe and healthy students, well-rounded educational opportunities, some technology, although the technology needs to be more innovative. It can't just be buying hardware on this one. Some of the other programs like Title I, you can do that. Okay, Title IV, a little bit more restrictive, and it's got to be a little more innovative. So this one is a little more, I call it an eclectic grant. Ms. Borrego and I discuss that all the time. We call it's a little bit different than the others. It has to be things that are innovative that we haven't done before. Dual language, huge part of that. Early college, also a huge part of that. Extra duty, we've got that for certain things. We've got a fine arts. The summer camps that have been going on, we actually pay for those. Some people don't know that, proud of that. We do a lot of work with Mrs. Crocet and Mr. Clark with AP testing because that's allowable if we want to supplement it and help to pay some of the costs for that, because students who might otherwise have a hard time paying the College Board for those. We have those. And also another thing that I also wanted to say was in Title III, something I left out that I wanted to go back to was the family engagement component there with the Latino family literacy. And then we also do a little bit of family engagement activities here with Title IV depending on the program. But we've got a few signature programs on this and dual language, like for example, the compliance clerk position is up for approval tonight, and that's going to be a big one as we get to expanding that, if you all approve that later, of course. Okay, so those are our 5 titles that we have and where we are, our general setup with those. And this is a public hearing, which I come before you all, and I do this one yearly as we get ready for the new fiscal year on the ESSA federally funded programs, and that's when I ask for any public input. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starkey.
Yes, sir.
Questions, the board, at this time? Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Our next item is 5B, proposed 2022 school district budget and discussion of proposed tax rate. Our presenter is Tony Reza.
So President Morales, Interim Superintendent Carmona, and members of the board. Tonight, the administration is conducting a public hearing on the proposed budget and tax rate for the 2021-22 fiscal year. The date and time of this hearing was published both in the El Paso Times and the West Texas Courier as required by state law, the purpose of which is to provide the public with information on the budget and the proposed tax rate, and to allow the public, the stakeholders, to provide feedback to the governing board. We will now review the revenues that comprise the preliminary budget that will be recommended for adoption tonight. The district's general fund revenues are based on the following revenue assumptions: that the district's property values will increase by 7.12% from the prior year for a projected taxable value of $11.5 billion. Our projected average daily attendance will increase a little under 1% to 44,680. That our weighted average daily attendance will increase by 2.44% to 62,172. That the values used by the state to determine our state funding will be $12.3 billion, and that there will be a decrease in the maintenance and operations tax rate. Here you have the major budget drivers for the proposed budget. They are as follows: a commensurate general pay increase of 4% for teachers, nurses, librarians, and counselors, and all other job classes. A lump sum payment of $1,000 for all eligible employees. Additional secondary instructional positions due to projected growth in those campuses and the dual language program. Additional instructional positions for special education program. Funding to increase the number of 3-year-old half-day preschool, pre-kindergarten classes at various campuses. Funding to provide laptops for the incoming freshman class, and funding to cover increases in property insurance and utilities. This slide presents the revenues associated with the three funds to be adopted. As you can see, the general fund has $451.5 million in projected revenues, and we will be using $8.7 million in fund balance to balance the budget. The majority of the funding in the general fund comes from the state. As you can see, almost 72% of that revenue comes from the state, and local revenue comprises 24%. The child nutrition program is projected to generate $32.5 million in revenues, and we will use $632,000 in fund balance to balance the budget. The debt service is estimated to generate $62.8 million in revenues, and we'll have a slight budget surplus. So in sum, the total revenues total up to $546,627,128, with a total fund balance to balance the budget use of $9,352,641. This slide represents and reflects the manner in which the board will adopt the budget by fund and by function. The funds are associated by the column amounts, and the functions are represented by the row amounts. The major funds to be adopted are the general fund, the child nutrition program, and the debt service fund. The grand total of these combined budgets is $556,322,097. This is an $18.8 million budget decrease from the current year revised budget. As published in the newspapers, presented is the tax rate and the tax impact on the average resident in the Socorro Independent School District. The current proposed tax rate being $1.304779. Note, this is a projected 3.8-cent tax rate decrease from the prior year. And as you can see, there is an increase in the average taxable value of the average homeowner. This increase in values is showing a tax impact to the average homeowner of $178.41. And so let's be clear here. The Socorro Independent School District has no control over the average taxable value. That is a function of the market. What the district can control is the tax rate, and the district is currently proposing a tax rate decrease. Presented is a listing of the proposed tax rates for the surrounding school districts. Please note that some, if not all, of these rates will change once each of these school districts receive their certified property values in late July. And as you can see, currently Socorro ISD has the lowest maintenance and operations tax rate of the 3 largest school districts. So are there any questions with the presentations? And if there isn't, President Morales, the board now needs to solicit input from the community concerning
Mr. Morales.
budget.
I have a question here for Mr. Nahara. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, sir.
Regarding the tax rate. Too close or too far? Is the dollar 30 and all those, digits that follow it there, is that the same as the effective tax rate?
At this point, we're waiting to get our certified values, and at that point, I can go ahead and calculate the effective tax rate. So it is in the sense that we no longer kind of calculate that for school purposes. What we're doing under House Bill 3 is we're looking at what we call the values that come in, and from there we calculate the maximum compressed tax rate, and then we can add 5 pennies. So it's different at this time.
Okay, and then the voter approval rate. I
Yes,
noticed
sir.
it's the same as the proposed tax rate.
Yes, sir. And the reason for that is currently Socorro ISD, once it compresses its tax rate, it's allowed to increase the maintenance and operation tax rate by 5 cents. And then from there, we add our interest and sinking fund total tax rate. So that is $1.304779. So we're at the voter approved tax rate. In other words, if we adopt a tax rate higher than the $1.304779, we must have a voter approval tax rate election. So we're at the limit, so to speak.
And the budget assumptions that you've presented here then factor that given tax rate, right?
Yes, sir. Now, I want to just point out, as I mentioned in the prior workshop, I'm projecting what our certified values are going to be. I'm trying to be conservative. I don't want to publish a tax rate that is going to be lower than what our tax rate will be once we receive our certified values. So I'm being a little conservative. When we get our certified values, it's very possible that the total tax rate will probably be lower than that $1.30.
As far as the funds go,
Yes, sir.
we can't mix the money from the funds, right? We can't take child nutrition services and say, oh, well, they've got a lot of money, let's just add that to the general fund, can we?
What is possible is that if, let's say, the child nutrition fund is having a deficit, then we can certainly use the general fund to offset that deficit and transfer it. Now, technically speaking, we are not supposed to be mixing funds. The tax rate that's used for the general fund is for the general fund, but we can use it to supplement maybe the child nutrition fund if it's in the red. We've been using the operating fund balance to transfer money into the internal service fund to cover that. But technically speaking, these taxes are collected for those particular funds.
Right, and then, so the debt service, that's dictated by our bond expenditures and requirements, right? The voter approved bond, so basically, that's just established at whatever is required for us to pay back those amounts?
Exactly. The rate is what's required. First of all, when we had a bond election, we promised the voter that we wouldn't go up a certain percentage, and the tax rate is what's needed to service the debt for that particular year.
I think that's it for now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yes, so I think we have to solicit input from the public, Mr. Gunn.
Okay. At this time, if there's anyone interested in providing any feedback to the board on the proposed budget and tax rate, please come to the podium at this time. Basically what Mr.
How's everybody doing up there? Okay. As you guys all know, we've been running at an 80% clip this year. we are down people in every direction. And a lot of us, especially the hour workers, have lost a lot of money. I can only speak for myself, but I know my other constituents, my other colleagues, they've been hit pretty hard. Me, per se, I lost $8,000 this year. I think we could do more. I'm not talking about the tax rate. I think we could do a lot more. When have you ever seen a district like EPISD who's had so many financial issues do $2,000 and a $2,000 bonus, $4,000 worth of bonus? Where did they get that from? Because they're going to have a lot of carryover. What are we not talking about? We're not talking about the carryover. What did we not spend? Did we not spend fuel for the buses for the majority of the year? That's a lot of money. Did we not save in just about every category there is? And with the federal funds, there's stuff that we put in for the pandemic that can go back and release more money. We need to do more. We can do more. I wasn't sure before today if we could, but we can adopt more. Not asking to bring over a 4% raise, but we can do another bonus. And I see that we brought this bonus up to August, the middle of August for hourly and the end of August for the teachers. Why can't we do one in December? We can also do that. It's there. It's only $6 million out of a $500 million budget. It's not that hard. You guys know it's there. We can do this for our employees. Why do we have to bow down to districts that don't even have half of our fund balance? Why are they going to outdo us? Is that what we are? Is that where we're going to begin? We need to do more. We can do more for our employees. We just came out of a pandemic. We need to heal our employees. And that becomes healing mentally and financially. And if you guys just allow just a 4% $1,000 bonus that was prematurely done for political reasons, money came up later. And we all know that. When do we ever do a budget proposal in April? Never. Maybe only the time that it's a week before an election. We can fix it. I'm proposing we can do an extra $1,000 bonus for our employees in December. You guys can do that. It can be done today. We don't need to wait. You guys can do that for the employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. I have an item that was brought to me late this afternoon having to do with in the open forum. I'm going to read that at this time. For the record, we received a written request for public comment from Jay Mendoza, and it will be added to the minutes of tonight's meeting. I'm going to go ahead and to our next item, item 6, consent items.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosa.
Mr. Moraes, I'd like to pull D2.
Give that to me.
D as in David, 2.
You got it.
David, 3. E4A. And F, please. Motion to approve consent agenda excluded all items I've listed.
Second.
We have a motion to approve by Mr. Nahara and a second by Mr. Guerra. Are there any further questions? Any discussion on any of the items? All those in favor?
Aye.
Are those opposed? The motion carries. All items under the consent agenda, with the exceptions of the three, or actually four that were pulled from Mr. Nahara, we're going to go ahead and cover them individually. D2. Got stop loss reassurance health plan. Mr. Nahara.
You brought
Mr.
back
Garcia.
up Mr. Garcia, right?
Mr. Garcia.
Yes, sir.
Handle that one.
Mr. Garcia, question, sir. So I'm looking at this document, the supporting documentation about the costs, and I see almost everybody else is a decrease. Why are we staying with Cigna if everybody else proposes a decrease in our annual premium, and it seems to be that Cigna is increasing?
All right. So, Mr. Morales, Ms. Carmona, members of the board, my name is Samuel Garcia, Director of Purchasing. Agenda item D2 is standalone stop loss for our health insurance program, which means that we are getting some insurances so that for those claims that are above a certain dollar limit. So in this case, our stop loss is $400,000 for every individual single claim that goes over and above that amount. So the evaluation committee reviewed all the submittals, and the other companies that were not selected, even though they were had a less premium, annual premium, were not selected for a couple of reasons. They were incomplete on their submittals, which meant that we did not receive the full information as to how soon monies would be transferred depending on the claims. The other items is that some of the companies that submitted some of those less premiums were also indicating that they would not provide coverage for a couple of cases that we had on our books, which meant that if we have claims that are over $1 million, they said, we don't want to cover those people. So the committee felt that that was going to impact those individuals that had that coverage. So that was one of the primary reasons, is that they were not going to cover certain individuals that would have $1 million claims, $800,000 claims. That meant that we as a district under this health insurance program would have to fund the whole bill for those particular individuals.
Okay, Mr. Garcia, so I think what I'm hearing you say is that while on paper in the presentation, it appears that it would be a reduction based on previous experience, and who knows what the future holds, right?
Correct.
But all we can do is make decisions based on what we've actually experienced in our claims in the past.
Yes, sir.
And this isn't the first year that we've had, claims that exceed those dollar amounts. This isn't a one-year COVID exception. This is, unfortunately, just due to the size of our population, we do have claims that exceed or hit those
limits,
what appears to be a ceiling by those other providers. So while on paper it appears it's a reduction, our exposure is actually higher because they won't cover some of those previous claims that we've had. And if we were to take into account, I imagine if our stop loss is 400 and they want the ceiling to be 1 million, and if we had claims that exceed that, what appears to be a $200,000 savings would quickly be eliminated by potentially one claim that they refused to cover.
Correct.
I was also reading that some of the information that they provided was incomplete. So in some of those, it's hard to determine. Once again, while we had to make a decision based on the information that was provided and come up with an estimate, even that estimate may not necessarily be accurate because they didn't answer everything in its entirety. So we're trying to make the best decision possible based on the limited information that we have. Is that accurate
At the time,
as well?
yes. And as part of the process, we do allow those vendors to come back under a best and final offer scenario, which they were given that opportunity, and still at that point they did not want to commit.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question. Is going to say, okay, so they realize we submitted an incomplete, response, or we didn't have enough information. We told them it was incomplete. We offered them the opportunity to come
Correct.
back, and in spite of that, they still didn't provide the information that we were requesting.
Correct.
Okay, no further questions. Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Nahara and a second by Mr. Barrera. Are there any other questions pertaining to this item? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Second item that was pulled was item D3. I'm sorry, yeah, D3.
Mhm.
Got request for increase.
Mhm.
A, visual performing arts supply and accessories, and also district projects or projectors and accessories. Go ahead, Mr. Knight.
Mr. Garcia, just a reminder for me, please, and I mean, I don't want to cover both items individually. It's the same thing, and my question applies to both of them. I know this is a request for increase, and please just remind or confirm for me. We're asking for an increase in these items. Asking for this increase does not mean that we're going to spend an additional $60,000 or $400,000. All that says is that we issued an RFP. Initially, we anticipated we were going to spend X number of dollars, and now we're nearing that, and the district may still have needs across, the entirety of the department, especially right now as we're preparing for the next school year.
Exactly.
And so if we say that the RFP is for $100,000, or let's just subtract 60 from 210 there, 150. If we say it's 150 and we hit that 150, we can't spend money in excess of that anymore, right? So if there's any needs from anybody across the district and they have the money in their budget, because we can't spend money that's unbudgeted. There is a school, a department, or somebody else that has to have that money in their budget. So if we don't increase this, and they have a need and they have the money, they can't make that purchase. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the reason we're increasing it is because we anticipate there's needs. Some departments and schools still have money, and this allows them to, or by increasing this RFP amount, both of these, it allows them to make those expenditures should they be necessary.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you, sir. That was my question. Motion to approve D3?
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Nahara and a second by Mr. Barrera. Are there any questions on the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Got the third item that was pulled, item E4, memorandum of understanding, A, Project Vida Health Center Behavioral Health Services. Go ahead, Mr. Nahara. We got our
President Morales, Ms.
Ms.
Carmona, members of
Rosé
the
will
board.
address it.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Crocet, so just a question. As I look at this Project Vida Health Center, I see that it does say at no cost to the district. And so how is it that PVHC, Project Vida Health Center, Behavioral Health Sciences, is getting funded for these services that they provide to our students?
It's through a grant. They apply every 5 years, I believe, is their cycle. And with those funds, they're able to add more professional counselors to our district. We have increased, I think, over the last 7 years that we've had them, to almost all of our high schools and several of our middle schools, and it's through a grant.
So let's say I have a need. Well, not me, my daughter. Let's say she has a need. I could say my son, but I don't have a son, so it would have to be my daughter. And she graduated from high school, so even that point's invalid, right? But anyways, let's just say that my daughter had a need. I have insurance. Will the grant funds be expended for that person, or am I required to pay because I have insurance?
So the Project Vida works with the individual in regards to what you're able to pay or not. We don't ask for insurance information. That is up to the individual to disclose or not, but they work with the individual. And the services are not just for the child, they're also for the family. So that if the need is greater than the child, which we find a lot of the times, then it's provided for the whole family.
Okay, so the nature of my question was to make sure that, you know, the grant expenditures, and I completely understand your answer, and you answered my question in entirety, was how can we make the grant funds go further? And so, as a parent, if I have insurance, I can offer.
Disclose that information, yes,
right,
sir.
disclose the information, and therefore,
Cover that cost, and that way we can cover more students, or Project V that can cover more students with their
absolutely. But it's
projects.
not also a barrier to the provision of service, because if either they don't disclose it, or if there
Yes,
is
sir.
an inability to actually.
And that's what we find sometimes, that the families don't want to disclose that information, or the child sometimes, you know, doesn't know that information as we serve them, so we don't want to stop the services.
Do they share with us information about how many students they serve? Okay.
So one of the things that you, as the board, made it very clear is that we wanted a very close handoff from the counselor to our Project Vida partners. We wanted to know exactly who they were serving, how they were being served, and what the process was. So all of the guidance, all the connection is made through the counselor or the nurse, depending on the service, because sometimes it's medical. And Project Vida also provides medical services.
Okay. So I appreciate that as well, because all too many times we've seen, unfortunately, where grant funding goes to third parties and then they abuse the funding. They use it for other things, unfortunately, other than what it was originally intended for. So by having, I don't know if I'd call it an audit mechanism, but at least a tracking mechanism, we can at least make sure that the services are being provided to our students as is being documented. So I'm glad we have that provision or that requirement in there as well. I have no further questions. Thank you. Motion to approve E4A.
Second.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any further questions to the board? I have a motion by Mr. Michael Nahara and a second by, I'm not sure, Mr. Eddie Mena. Motion to approve? Yes?
Yes.
I'm sorry. The motion carries. Thank you. Good.
I'm sorry.
Supposed to say all those in favor.
Oh, sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Jumping ahead here. We've got another item, item F, Mr. Nahara, pertaining to, I believe it was.
State of Texas.
State of Texas, yes.
Item F, consider approval of job descriptions.
Good evening, President Morales, school board members, officers, and Interim Superintendent, Ms. Carmona. I'm Elva Chavez, Director of Human Resources for Secondary Staffing and Recruiting. Today, the Department of Human Resources brings you 4 new job descriptions. I do have all the parties here, Mr. Nahara, to answer any of your questions. How can I assist you?
One fundamental questions are these new job description? And that's not even the right question. Are we eliminating job descriptions and or roles that are no longer necessary and therefore adding these job descriptions because they're new roles that are more either appropriate or developing needs? So we basically eliminated one role and added another one and redefined the job description so that the role that's there is what's needed and meet the needs of the area?
And some of them, sir, like the administrative intern, we already had that. That is for our new administrative interns that have been in the, we are growing our own leaders and we're putting them in there. This year we had 3 and next year we'll have 2 on the campuses. So we just needed to have a job description for those administrative interns.
Okay.
And that's the first one. Our second one is our data
So-
entry.
If I may, I'm
Yes,
sorry for
sir.
interrupting. So just for clarity, those roles already exist.
Yes, sir.
We're just now creating an administrative job description so that they understand what the role is, what their responsibilities are.
Yes,
Okay,
sir. They're
thank you,
being
ma'am.
paid their teacher salary. We just needed to make sure that they understood that role.
Okay.
Okay. The second one is the data entry clerk in community education with Ms. Justo. And that one, we did eliminate one because we needed this one.
Okay.
Okay. The third one was a fine arts facilitator, and we already have one in that place. And since the other one is going to retire, we needed somebody there because they do work the entire year. And so we did need that one in that place because they do work during the summer and they weren't getting paid for all that during the summer.
So then all we're really doing is updating that job description?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
gotcha.
And the third one is our Dual Language Academy clerk. Now, because our dual language program is blossoming and growing, we did need that, and that will be paid by state and federal with Dr. Starkey.
Right. I'm sorry? Oh, right. Okay, so that's an emergent need due to the success
Yes,
of
sir.
our
And since
program.
we keep on adding every year another grade, so that's the reason we have that one.
Understood. Motion to approve item F.
F.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I have a motion made by Mr. Michael Nahara and a second by, I believe, Mr. Barrera. Are there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Good. Item 7, new business. 7A, consider approval of Socorro ISD's 2021-2022 back-to-school plan.
Thank you to
Presenter,
President
Ms.
Morales,
Macias.
Interim Superintendent Carmona, members of the board. Today, we're here as a team to share with you our back-to-school plan for the 2021-22 school year. As you know, this year has been trying. We flew our plane and we built it as we flew it through COVID-19. And at this time, we're landing it and we're already powering up our time machine for next year. Last board meeting, we shared with you that we were going to start going out and providing information to our community to get feedback on the plan that we had, which was our back-to-school plan. And what we did is we actually had 65 stakeholder meetings where we got over 1,500 participants to attend and over 400 written responses that you all received in your board packet. With that, during this time, Governor Abbott actually presented his General Order 36, which is, as you see us now, we have the option of wearing our mask or we have the option of not wearing our mask. So that actually propelled us into the proposal that we're doing now. So next year, you might see some classrooms that all of our children and all of our teachers decide not to wear a mask. Or you might see some of our students that might decide to wear a mask and might decide to still have their barriers with them. It's about that personal safety and truly how they feel. So that's something that for next year we're going to keep in mind. And as we transition forward, it's going to be very important that we keep everybody's sense of comfort at the forefront. So some individuals might have their mask, not need any PPE, and some others might require their mask and all the protective equipment that we're going to have for them. So in summary, or pretty much if I read this to you, this is pretty much our back-to-school plan, which is we're going back to what we know is that students will attend school in person 5 days a week. Classroom teachers will provide in-person learning and will no longer support both face-to-face and virtual students simultaneously. So we're going back to what we know. However, we learned a lot through the pandemic, and we're going to keep those systems in place to ensure that we mitigate and minimize the spread of the virus if it does come into our campuses. And one thing that we can never guarantee is that COVID-19 won't come on board. The one thing that we can guarantee is that we've learned how to minimize the spread of COVID-19 if it does come into our campuses.
Good evening, President Morales, Interim Superintendent Carmona, and Board Trustees. And so elaborating on that with our face-to-face instruction. We're encouraged by the improved conditions, just as Ms. Macias had been speaking about, and in our community, if you look at that green dot, it symbolizes a lot more than just a green dot. We have had 85 days in the green zone, which means that our hospitalization rate is at an all-time low at a 2.24%. And if you remember back in the fall, we really thought we wouldn't see this, and so it's great news to see that. So with that, we look forward to seeing all the students attending classes on our campuses in the fall for this upcoming school year. We're focusing our efforts on providing an excellent educational experience for students that support their social, emotional, and academic growth. and know that we put social emotional first because we realize that as students return to campuses, they're going to be coming back with different needs, and the social and emotional needs will need to be met first before we even address the academics. And our goals. So if you look at those slides right there, I think we all want to see those events happening again, or band events, or sports. And so students are returning to their campuses for in-person learning to include hands-on activities, small group interventions, station rotations, and teacher one-on-one support. A big question during our community meetings was, what is the instruction going to look like if I send my child back to school? And so no, they will no longer be having the teacher give instruction through a device. It is going to be face-to-face. The teacher is going to be giving direct instruction, and all those activities I mentioned, plus more that we know our best practices in the classroom, will be occurring each day. In addition, all extracurricular activities will resume for students to include athletics, fine arts, UIL, clubs, etc. We know that students love our academics, but we know that what takes them to school is the extracurricular, the clubs, the fine arts, those things that make our students connect to our campuses. We will be evaluating students and providing an intervention plan to address learning loss that may have occurred during the COVID-19 pandemic, and know that we already have been looking at data, and we have been looking at data throughout the pandemic. And so that is always on the forefront of our weekly meetings as we get together and we look at it. Daily social emotional learning. You heard me stress that that is one of the main priorities as we start transitioning our students back to campuses. And with that, we've been doing work already with that. Of course, we're going to have our amazing campus counselor support every day for our students, as we always do. And their lessons will be focusing on intervention and lessons. Outside agency support. You heard Ms. Grosse talk about Project Vida, and then we also, remember, have our Texas Tech and our telehealth as well. We continue to work with CIS, our communities and schools, which means not only do we have a parent liaison and counselors, but we also have a licensed social worker on campus, and those are invaluable. They help with attendance, they help with reaching out to students at home, and helping families with whatever struggle they may be having, and provide resources and connect them to agencies as well. We have our campuses that will continue with the PBIS model, which is positive behavior intervention and supports. And we have SEL training for admin, faculty, and staff. And in fact, last week, our very first week that we were on our summer break, we already began that work with J.C. Pohl, and you'll see that in the last bullet, where we have contracted with him to come work with campus stakeholders, administrators, counselors, and other key personnel, where they're going to be looking at reinventing campus culture, because we know that while we're going back, it's not really going back to what we know, right? Everyone is coming back, as I keep mentioning, coming out of a different experience, and so we want to make sure that there's supports and everyone is feeling comfortable as they return. Curriculum and instruction. What will instruction look like in the new year? Again, students are going to be in person and engaged with teacher-directed whole group lessons, small group purposeful talk. Remember, we know students learn from a teacher, but sometimes they learn best from each other, so we need to give them the opportunity to speak to one another. Teacher small group intervention, students engaged in station rotations, and collaborative learning groups. Hands-on inquiry-based instruction, students provided with manipulatives for concrete learning supports, that hands-on learning that's so critical to making those cognitive connections. Peer mentorship and pairings in classes, rigorous instruction with differentiated options for students, and an emphasis on acceleration. And TEA, as we meet with them, and as we have been meeting with them throughout the pandemic, they have always been stressing the acceleration. We need to come back academically, and we need to not only move forward, but we need to do it in an accelerated pace to fill in gaps and make sure that our students are back on their educational path. SISD will remain a one-to-one district with each child having their own device. Technology will be used as an instructional support. So the big question during many of our community meetings was, will my child still have their device? Yes. Will they be on it every day? Probably not, maybe not. It will be a support in classroom. Remember that technology, being a one-to-one district, was always a goal of ours, and the pandemic rushed the plan along, and so now we're there. So we're going to continue the best practices and using devices as support. Continuity of services, response to intervention process. RTI is a form of supplemental instruction provided in tiers. It provides the systematic implementation of a research-based intervention for the child who struggles and the evaluation of the child's response to it. So RTI helps with struggling students so that we can intervene at an early stage and provide remedies and interventions, and then we monitor from there and and see if they're working, and then if they're not, we continue and we go to a new tier and a new level, and we go into other interventions to assist them. Learning loss interventions, and so we're going to have embedded in-class interventions, after school and intersession tutoring, as we always have, Saturday and summer school, target instruction identified through the professional learning communities, and our bridge camps.
Good evening, President Morales, Interim Superintendent Ms. Carmona, and members of the board. So as we've learned about what the instruction will look like, now we're going to talk about other areas of our school. And as you can see, this next slide talks about hallway transitions and other areas. So one of the things that we will see, and you will see in our schools, is we're going to keep our hand sanitizing stations available for our students and for our employees. Our elementaries will resume their normal systems and protocols. So what does that mean? Well, our students will go face-to-face for PE. They will have face-to-face for art, music, their fine arts. There will no longer be the visual piece of it or the technology piece through the internet, right? It will be face-to-face for them. At our secondary schools, we will continue with the A-B block schedule. We're doing that so that we can continue to reduce the student movement throughout our schools. For recess, we'll also maintain some of our safety protocols. As was stated earlier, our face mask will be optional for our students. If they choose to wear a face mask, then they will be definitely allowed to wear them. Any of our frequently touched areas or items will be disinfected regularly. Our sporting equipment, jungle gyms, any of our gaming items. So our students will enjoy their recess, but we will also make sure that we are disinfecting them on a regular basis. Hand washing and our hand sanitizing rituals and routines will be in place. So it's going to be important that as students come back from recess, as students come back from PE or their classes or their ancillary classes, they will be washing their hands, especially before eating. And that leads us to our food services, our breakfasts and our lunches. So breakfast and lunch systems will include physical distancing when possible and sanitizing protocols. So what does that mean? Well, we have best practices in place already, and we're going to continue emphasizing them. For example, ensuring students are not sharing their food, right, or utensils. Continuing to use disposable food service paper goods. Again, washing our hands with soap and water before we're eating and after we're eating, or utilizing the hand sanitizers. Definitely our administrators and adult supervision will be present in our cafeterias to reinforce these safety measures, and our cafeteria teams will continue to clean and sanitize our dining areas, the tables, the seats, in between our meal service times. Volunteers. Our volunteers will be able to come back to our schools. We're excited for that. And at our principal's discretion, they'll be permitted on campus as needed for any of our projects, our meetings, our events, our activities that we have. They will stay in our designated areas and follow the campus protocols. The Hall Pass Wellness Questionnaire will be utilized at the time of arrival. We will ask if they're not feeling well, please stay home, right? We know that we want everyone to feel well and to stay home and take care of themselves if they're not feeling well. All volunteers will complete an online application that includes a background check. Now, we've had that in the past, and we will continue that on. So we're excited that our volunteers will be returning back to our schools this year. Visitors, we'll continue to check in our visitors through our security system. We'll have the utilization of the doorbell and our speaker to secure our campus. And of course, we'll have our Hall Pass COVID-19 safety checks. Those will also continue. As you look at our calendar for the upcoming school year, it looks as it did in the past. We're very excited. Our first day of school will be August 2nd. We will have our 2-week fall intersession break again, as we've done in the past, from August 4th through the 15th. The first week, usually we have for our interventions and enrichment camps of that fall intersession. And then, of course, we'll have our Thanksgiving break, a week in November, our winter break. Our second semester will start January 5th. And then, of course, in the spring, we'll have our spring intersession, and our last day of school will be June 2nd for our students. One thing that we will keep this year, or this upcoming year, that we started this year, is our bell schedule. So if you notice, our elementary schools will start at 7:30, and they will end at 2:45. Our pre-K-8 schools will start at 8:15 and end at 3:30. Of course, in between there, you see our 3-year-old program. They have an AM and a PM time frame for both the elementary schools and the pre-K-8 schools. Our middle schools will start at 8:15 and end at 3:30, and our high schools will start at 9 a.m. and end at 4:15 p.m. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ms. Macias.
And just to share with you, these were the wellness protocols that we learned during COVID-19, and we're going to keep for next year. So all of these PPE items we've had throughout the year, and we're going to continue to have. We're going to have hand sanitizer, disinfecting solution, disinfecting wipes. Our nurses and our teachers with our students with special needs, they actually requested special kits. They'll continue to have those as necessary. Disposable and personal masks will be available. Face shields, dust dividers, and 95 masks. Again, everything that we have and have learned this year, we're going to continue to carry over next year. It's going to be that personal request, and it's how every single person feels. So some individuals will not need any PPE at their request. Those that do, we will make sure to have it for the remainder of next year. For our e-swipe, a big thank you to our technology department and to our nurses. They collaborated to create an e-swipe system. E-swipe, every single day that we came in during this COVID-19, we had to do a little check and do a little check and identify if we felt well to come into the campus. What that did was that personal check. For example, when you go to Walmart and somebody says hi to you, it gives you that personal, somebody knows me, I'm giving you my authority that I'm not going to do anything bad. Same thing with e-swipe. By doing that personal check every day, it gave people the safety, or felt safe, that everybody on our campus was supposed to be there and was doing everything that they had to do to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. As we transition to next year, we're going to keep e-swipe. However, e-swipe is now only going to be necessary if somebody is not feeling well. If somebody's COVID positive, or if somebody in their household is COVID positive, or if they're feeling ill. The reason we wanted to keep e-swipe is that way we could continue to contact trace. Our nurses, again, a big, huge support system during this time. If somebody's not feeling well, our nurses will call that individual, help them do the contact tracing, and ensure to give them the next steps, and that'll be our employees and our students. For transportation, this coming year, we're going to continue the safety protocols that we had, which was hand sanitizer. We're going to have masks available for anybody that wants to wear them. We're sitting families together. We're going to have a seating chart available. And the other thing is that our bus drivers, when it's safe, they crack open the back and front windows just to help with that circulation. That's something that we're going to continue to do as we move forward. Depending on our ridership, we might have additional riders. This year, we put 1 student per seat. Moving forward, we've been sharing transparently with our parents that next year we might have 2 to 3 students per seat. And that's something that we want to make sure as we move forward that we're very transparent with our parents of the protocols. That way, if they have to make different choices, they could already plan ahead of time. For transportation, those that qualify for transportation are those that live 2 or more miles away from the school, or if they have an authorized ARD that gives them transportation services, or a couple of months ago, you all approved our hazardous routes. So if they fall under the hazardous routes, those are our students that actually qualify for services. Our nurses, one of the protocols that they ask to keep is they have an isolation room. Just like when you go to the doctor and you go to the well side or the sick side, our nurses are still going to have their 2 rooms. One is for regular routine checkups if you need medicine or a Band-Aid, or if your tooth fell and you need a little holder. They'll continue to have that nurses station, plus they'll have their isolation room for anybody that is not feeling well. That way we make sure we continue to mitigate the spread of those viruses. As I mentioned, our nurses will be doing our contact tracing, and they'll also be doing the quarantining of our students, anybody that reports an e-swipe. One thing that they have in place is they have access to the M-Track system. So we do not ask students if they've been vaccinated. In case they are of close contact, what occurs is our nurses, they have access to M-Track, so whenever they call the parent, they'll already know if somebody was within 6 feet of the child that was COVID positive, if they were there more than 15 minutes, and if they were vaccinated or not. The reason the M-Track is important is because new information has come out. If you're vaccinated in close contact but without any symptoms, you don't have to be quarantined. So those are the things that our nurses are going to continue to do as we move forward for next year. They'll also be helping us with our Binax rapid test if necessary, and they also have access to telehealth. Our district air quality and maintenance. Since 2004, our maintenance and operations department has upgraded our HVAC system, and what it does, it naturally purges our air in a rotating schedule, 5:30, noon, and 9 p.m., which means that fresh air is brought in and the air inside is purged out. They also have CO2 sensors that if at any point they pick up that there's too much CO2 in the air, it'll naturally purge. So that's a system that we have and will continue to have, of course, for the years to come. Maintenance and operations, one thing that they've continuously done, and it helps us keep our air quality, is our custodians, they clean and disinfect the grills and the vents consistently. So that's something that we've learned and will continue to do as we move forward. Cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting, I've used these interchangeably, but maintenance and operation has taught us that they're very specific of what they do. The systems that they've developed and implemented will continue moving forward. So cleaning, we all help with the cleaning piece, which is wiping down, brushing, doing anything of the surface area. Sanitizing, we have special chemicals that we use for sanitizing. For example, in our cafeterias, the chemicals that we use for cleaning the cafeterias is very different than the chemicals that we use for disinfecting. For example, our nurses' stations, some of our special ed classrooms, our restrooms. We also have the electrostatic sprayers at every one of our campuses that we'll continue to use, especially if there is a COVID positive individual at our campuses. That's something, the protocols that we have. We also have the electrostatic sprayers for our buses. They'll be using them once a week to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to keep safe and healthy. Just as a summary on the feedback that we received, again, in your board packets on Friday, you received all the feedback. We did 65 community meetings. You all got all of the written responses. Our PR department created a frequently asked question based on that feedback that we received. It's going to go up, I believe, today or tomorrow on our SISD website. That way, as we put all of this updated information, if you all give us approval, it'll be for our community to get feedback, and not just that, to get the final approved version that you all give us. So these are some of the frequently asked questions that were presented to us. On the FAQ document on our website, once you click on one of these questions, it actually answers the question that was asked. So for example, how can the community get information regarding active and cleared cases in the district? So if you go to our SISD website under our popular links, you could actually click on COVID-19 cases. This is a dashboard that our PR department has put up since August of 2020, and it has all of our active cases and cleared cases by campus, and that's something that our community could look into and get any information that they need. And this is something that helped us as we went through. It was transparency, and that way every time that our nurses had a student or an employee that they had to quarantine, the information was up there for our public to see. As in summary, for our 2021-22 school year, our safety and wellness protocols will be as follows. Cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting will continue, just like I mentioned, as we've learned. Personal hygiene, hand washing, and respiratory etiquette that our nurses have always taught us, that's something that will be taught and retaught. Some of our campuses, they actually have alarm clocks where it goes off and our principals go on and say, okay, it's time to clean. It's just those natural things that we want to do to keep safe as we move forward in 2021. Face masks are optional. We'll continue to have that PPE. Physical distancing is going to be based on capacity and risk. So for our elementaries, we know that we're not going to have our vaccinations just yet. We're crossing our fingers for September. So many of the barriers, many of the social distancing practices that we currently have, you're going to see moving forward. Every single campus is going to be a little bit different, but that's where our principals come in at those beginning of year meetings with our parents, where there'll be transparency and they'll be sharing what it's going to look like at each of our campuses for the 21-22 school year. PPE, as I mentioned, we're going to continue to have. Vaccinations, we're going to continue to work with everybody to have vaccinations for anybody that would want them. Our employee clinic actually got approved, and they have the Pfizer vaccine. So anybody 12 years and older can get the vaccine from our employee clinic. And contact tracing, as I mentioned, isolation, and the rapid testing will continue. For transparency and to get information, to be proactive, for the 21-22 school year, we had online registration. Back in April, we added this question to our online registration. It's a little survey question asking about virtual instruction. However, as we know, Senate Bill 1468 did not pass. Again, I'll say that again. Senate Bill 1468 was not approved. Therefore, the plan that we're sharing with you today, which is our back to school plan, that is the only option that we currently have. This data we wanted to make sure that we received proactively, but again, just one last time, Senate Bill 1468, which was the remote learning, it was not approved by Texas legislators. So our next
Morales?
steps, yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Nada.
Ms. Macias, so just clarification, since it did not pass, we can't offer virtual learning even if we wanted to, is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Nahida. No, we cannot.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And our next steps, as you heard before, we do have our ESSER 3 survey. It opened on June 10th through June 25th. We ask if everybody could give us their feedback. And our back to school plan, we're going to continue the rollout with our campuses now. So our campus principals, we give them the framework. And from there, our principals will transparently share what each single campus is going to look like for their parents. Any feedback? Any questions? At this time, I would like to request for our 2021-22 back to school plan to be approved by the board.
Motion to approve.
Second.
A motion was made by Mr. Eddie Mena and a second by Mr. Michael Nahara to approve the item as presented. Are there any further discussion?
Ms. Macias,
Go ahead,
the only discussion I have, I mean, the plan is perfect. That House bill, the only concern I have is charter schools. Do they plan to do the virtual learning, and are we going to lose students because of that?
Since Senate Bill 1468 did not pass, if any entity did not have virtual learning, an approved plan, they cannot build one.
So they cannot do?
No,
as well?
only the
Okay.
ones that were already approved before are the ones that will continue going. Here locally, we do have, I believe, one that, but it's based out of, I believe, Houston that we've heard of. But our local charter schools that you're talking about, none of them have that approved virtual learning at this time.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Morales, I have a comment. I'd like to publicly thank all of the individuals and departments that had a hand in generating the back-to-school plan. A lot of hard work went into it to gather data from the constituents, the community, and of course, most importantly, the students. Their perspective was also considered in putting together the plan. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carmona. I agree. Thank you. Thank you all. I know the hard work that was done. I've talked to individual cabinet members and those staff members, and I know they were working diligently to get this thing done, and they did. Thank you. Next item, we have 7B, consider approval of the 2021-2022 school district budget. Mr. Tony Ressa, please.
Yes, President Morales, Interim Superintendent Carmona, members of the board, the administration requests approval of the fiscal year 2021-22 proposed budget as presented by Fund and Function.
Questions?
Go ahead, Mr. McOnada. Go ahead.
All right, Mr. Ressa. I'm sorry, sir.
No worries.
I don't sit on the finance committee, so you're going to get a whole bunch of questions.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ressa, so I see that in the general fund revenue estimate, we're expecting or anticipating an increase of $3.3 million, correct?
That's correct.
Now, just for clarification, if our enrollment, our ADA doesn't, I don't know.
Pan out.
I'm sorry?
Pan out.
Correct. Then that $3.3 million really has no impact on us, right? We need to have the enrollment or the ADA to pan out in order for us to retain that $3.3 million, although it's nice to show it on here. If we don't have the students to substantiate that, all that money goes back to the state, correct?
Well, in other words, we don't generate that revenue, so
Right.
to speak, sir.
Okay.
So,
Sounds good. And then our investment or revenues, it looks like they're just under half. Now, although the stock market, if you've been following it, continues to increase and it has some shaky days, but overall, you know, it continues to be a positive market. But as a school district, as a government entity, we don't invest in the stock market, right?
that's correct, sir. We're prohibited by the Public Funds Investment Act to invest in stock. We have to
Prohibited?
Prohibited.
Okay. So we're basically only allowed to invest in
Investment pools, certainly certain securities,
bonds.
CDs, and right now you're looking at yields of about maybe 20 basis points.
Unfortunately, as stock markets do better, those other ones don't do as well.
That's correct. But then with the stock market, you can lose the principal.
Oh,
So-
absolutely.
So,
Right. Which is not an option because it's
Yeah.
not allowed anyways. Okay, continuing with the revenue, sir. There is, oh, never mind. Let me get to G. On the revenues, comment G says increase due to projected indirect cost revenue from ESSER 1 and ESSER 3 funding.
that's correct.
Is that ESSER 3 correct or is it ESSER 2?
It's ESSER 3.
Okay,
So with,
we're-
so at the time of the publication of the document that we provided to the board, we hadn't received notification from TA of ESSER 2. So at the time, we estimated what we think we were going to generate on the indirect costs for ESSER 1, which is about, $4 million since we already expended that. This is for next year. And then we're looking at about 99 million, well, a third of that, about 30 million. So that's why that amount has increased, because we're projecting an increase in the indirect cost amount.
Okay, so it's increased by about 3.3, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, now, continuing then with H, SHARS is decreasing significantly.
Yes, sir.
So, and that's because SHARS is based on services that we provide, correct?
That's correct. And usually there's a 1-year lag with respect to the revenue that we generate. And so because of in this current fiscal year, we didn't really have any services, we're projecting a decrease in the amount that we're going to record next year. And that's why there's a decrease there.
Okay. Mr. Dessa, help me understand line J. It says, variance due to the recording of the laptop acquisition for all incoming freshmen, but last year we had revenue, and this year we've got zero.
So what happens is that we certainly have a lease purchase for the incoming laptops that come in for the freshman class. And usually we budget that under Function 71 on the expenditure side. However, generally accepted accounting principles require us to book the transaction when we receive the devices. So this current year, we received the devices, and so we had to book a revenue and an expenditure, and it's a wash. And so that is why it's not listed for the upcoming year. We're waiting for is usually to receive those devices, and then we bring it as a budget amendment to the board, and we book that transaction. So that's why it's not listed for next year. But it will come to the board once we receive the devices.
So, but what I did hear you say is it's a wash. So even though there's, what, $2 million there, we had the matching expense to go with it too, so.
That's correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
thank you, sir. And then, moving on to expenses. Function 33, health services. Last year, or in FY '21, we had 10.3 million. This year we have 5.7 million. I also saw that our back-to-school plan includes continued supplies of PPE. So even though the state provided PPE for us this year, they're not doing the same this next coming year, are they?
Yes, sir. So what happens is that originally they were going to allocate CARES funding for PPE, and we went ahead and budgeted under our operating budget several $1 million for PPE because we needed to start purchasing PPE for our employees as well as our students. So what we received word is that the state was going to provide PPE after we had budgeted the funds and started expending funds. So we'd already done some expenditures. Then we got word that we were receiving a significant amount of PPE, and we had to record it. Also, we received word that the CARES funding could be used to reimburse the district for PPE as well. So we went ahead and we purchased laptops out of CARES 1, or what we call ESSER 1 funding. And then there was an additional program called Project Connectivity that the state implemented. And so we were able to transfer those expenses to Project Connectivity. It freed up $10 million, and then we went ahead and transferred the expenses that we incurred in our general fund into this CARES 1 funding. So we still have about $4 million left of ESSER 1 federal funding that we're gonna roll over into next year. And that's why we're not budgeting any PP in our general fund for next year. And that's why you see a decrease in the budget for next year for PPE. So I
Okay.
hope that was able to explain that variance, that decrease and so forth.
Okay, so the decrease is there, but it doesn't mean that,
We're still gonna be providing those PPEs and so forth.
right, but we have the funds somewhere else to continue to provide that at the required level.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, sir. Let's see, on transportation services, we had a discussion about equipment, and of course, our equipment is aging. Does the budget include replacement of buses?
Not in next year's budget, or that we currently don't have that. I had to reduce that because of the fact that we had a deficit and we implemented an additional increase in our compensation. However, having said that, we are looking at, and what I told the board was we were gonna look at federal funding, namely ESSER 3, to look at possibly purchasing buses for transportation. We do feel that we can certainly advocate the fact that the additional buses are necessary to ensure the separation of distance of our of our students, and that's why we're looking at ESSER 3 funding to be able to make up for these replacement of the buses that are needed.
Okay, so if I remember correctly,
Also, keep in mind, I think we have an allocation this current year that we're going to probably roll over for 10 buses and so forth.
okay, so for 10 buses, but then we're also going to need new buses, right?
And yes, sir, and we were looking at ESSER 3 funding to possibly be able to fill that need.
Okay, and the reason I asked that question, to be sure, because we're opening some new schools. And so our bus fleet, we don't have a lot of, I guess, empty buses or buses who sit in our lot waiting to be used as we open these new schools, right? So we're going to have to provide new buses so that we can provide transportation routes for those new schools.
That's
Mr.
correct,
Reza,
sir.
I don't know if any idea what the average cost of a bus is?
It's approximately $100,000.
$100,000.
For a regular transportation bus, as well as for, I think it's about a 24-passenger special education bus. It's a smaller bus, but because of the items that are needed, it's about the same cost.
So more or less, we're
so-
looking at about $2 million
For 20 buses.
for just our scheduled. right? And that's
Yeah.
not to say, and I wish I could say that would address, you know, the needs, but that's not the case. We still have others that, okay.
Yes, sir.
Does the budget include replacement of vehicles in other areas? I know that we have some other,
Yes, sir. With respect to operations, during the budget process, they did request, and they usually allocate in their budget for additional vehicles. Maybe it's not the amount that they want, but they certainly budget for additional vehicles and trucks. Also, police services usually budgets an amount for additional police cruisers.
okay. Mr. Dessa, as I look at the revenues and expenditures for FY21, it appears to me that there was well, just adding the two numbers, right? Without considering fund balance, expenditures exceeded revenues by 33 million. Is that right?
With respect to the current year budget, so to speak, yes, sir. And the reason for that also, Mr. Nakata, is the fact that we have other funds. We have these committed funds, Fund 172 and 173, where in past years, if you might recall, we brought to the board consideration to allocate and consign or certain fund balances for construction projects and renovations. So those balances are still there. I think there's about 12 or 13 million dollars that we went ahead and rolled over into the general fund. And so it's part of the existing fund balance that we have, so to speak. And traditionally, we do have that and so forth. So that's one of the reasons why we have that and so
Well,
forth.
even though the fund balance states, whatever the fund balance is, that fund balance includes funds that we've committed for other purposes but haven't used, right?
That's correct. And it'll be used if there's any expenses for those particular funds.
As an example, I believe we're evaluating facilities, restroom facilities to be exact, and we're looking at what the impact is there and maybe a proposal. So some of those funds could be dedicated to, and I know that's a decision that must be made, the proposal has to, but in concept, in theory, in whatever nebulous term I can use, it could go there, right?
That's exactly correct.
Okay. And so again, if I do the same thing for the proposed budget this year, FY22, there's an $8 million deficit.
That's correct. We're starting with an $8 million deficit that we're saying we're going to be using our unassigned fund balance to cover it. Again, it's the start. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. And so we keep track of that through the year, and through the finance committee, we, on a monthly basis, we kind of keep them appraised of where we think we're going to be ending up, especially in the latter part of the fiscal year.
What is, Mr. Dessa, do you know what our current fund balance is?
Total fund balance at the beginning of the fiscal year was, I believe, $118 million.
Okay.
Or 116, one of those two amounts, I'm sorry.
And is that unassigned, or does that
That's
include?
total.
That's
That's
total.
total.
Okay,
So
do you remember
unassigned,
unassigned?
the unassigned, I believe, is around $92 million,
Okay.
which is a little over about maybe 90 days of
90
fund
days.
balance.
Okay. Sounds good. And then for the ESSER 3 funding, Mr. Dessa, do we already know? I mean, because we're taking a survey, right? So I must admit I haven't seen the survey. Maybe I'm not going to get one anymore because my last student graduated, but I will? Okay.
Okay.
So the intent of the survey is to hear from the public what they feel the emergent needs of the district are, right?
Yes, sir.
Do we know how much we're getting in ESSER 3 funding yet?
Yes, we're getting $99 million in ESSER 3 funding, and we're projected to get about
$99 million this year?
for the period, for the 3 years. Right now, we're going to get $66 million once we submit the application.
Okay,
And then we'll get the remaining $33 million later.
so we don't have that money right now. We have to submit an application.
That's correct. And our intent is to submit that application in July.
Okay. So if we submit the application and we get the funding, considering, we're approving the budget today,
Yes, sir.
right?
Uh-huh.
I assume, and maybe I shouldn't, but let me just ask the question directly. You didn't plan on to spend $66 million with that. You didn't plan to spend all $66 million of that ESSER 3 funding that we have not submitted an application to receive yet, right?
No, sir, it's over 3 years. It's very difficult to spend $66 million in 1 year. I mean, it's over a 3-year plan, period. When we were developing the budget, I mean, we weren't sure if we were gonna get ESSER 3 funding at all. And so it came in around, I think, late April, if I'm not mistaken, is when we found out about it.
Okay. So if circumstances change, Mr. Reza, if we were to get that application submitted and we were to get the funding, are there items that I mean, is this budget written in stone? Do we have to stop here? Or if we
No, sir.
get,
So- No,
can
sir.
we reconsider some things and?
Yes, sir. Please keep in mind that the budget is a dynamic document. It is always being amended on a monthly basis. We bring to the board budget amendments because we're changing it constantly. So bottom line is that this document is not set in stone. It's certainly amended by the board as we go through the fiscal year.
Okay. Mr. Reza, I think that's all the questions I have for you, sir.
Thank you.
Talked about the buses. These are just for student transportation buses
That's correct,
in
sir.
schools. Are we looking at the other limousine buses that we?
I know that's something that's, I think, a request that was made by the Transportation Department. We have to look at that. So at this point, we're going to see what that might entail. Those buses, usually used buses, they're maybe about $300,000 or $400,000 used. New buses are over $1 million easily. So that's something that we can certainly look at, Mr. Castellanos. But I think it's important for us to look at the budget, get it adopted, and then see what's available.
Budget-wise, it's not gonna be looked at, but is it ESSER funding too? You're looking at that possibly if?
I will defer to Dr. Starkey. I think what we're doing is we're getting more information on that. I haven't seen anything on the frequently asked questions website that TA has about activity buses. I've seen something about regular transportation school buses. But it's something that we can look into, sir.
Morales, point of clarification?
Go ahead, Mr. Nahara.
Mr. Reza, just to be clear, the question Mr. Castellano was asking, this is our student activity buses, the coaches, the buses that the students take out of town, not our regular transportation yellow buses. So that is, when you're talking about cost, when you're talking about the ESSER funding, all of that, it is for, the 6 activities coaches that we have right now, correct?
So what he's referring to is the activity buses, yes.
Okay,
sir.
I just
Okay.
wanted to be sure we're all on the same page. Thank you, sir.
Starkey?
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I may, it's very likely that we are looking at our regular buses as a possibility with ESSER 3 funding due to the fact that that would be part of safety in a response to the pandemic due to the fact that that could maximize greater social distancing. However, I'm going to be straight up and tell you that the activity buses themselves will not be allowable under ESSER 3 funding because those are for extracurricular activities. That's kind of, some districts have some nice ones of those. We got some nice ones, but that's not going to be something that we can defend as pure pandemic related. So that is not going to be likely to happen. Our regular yellow bus transportation, we are looking at a fleet expansion on those because it's a pandemic response item.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stark. Thank you. So, the students will still be competing out of city,
Yes, sir.
Is there a plan in place that, because some of those buses are just too old and too much miles on them?
Yes, sir.
Is there a plan for leasing or something else in the budget
Well,
to
we all,
ensure that the safety of our children getting from here to the destination and back, is that in place?
yes, sir, we do have funds to be able to lease additional activity buses. I mean, the 6 activity buses aren't sufficient for the amount of trips that we have for a district our size. And so we do have contracted services funds budgeted so that we can go ahead and be able to lease those particular trips that are needed. But certainly we can start looking to see if there's a plan to be able to see how we can replace the current activity coach buses that we currently have.
Okay. But there is something in the budget in case,
Yeah,
just to lease these buses, because.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir, we do.
Another question, and so I guess if the buses all of a sudden were to break down, we'd be forced to go back to what we used to do before, which is just use third-party vendors, right?
That's correct.
Our kids would not lose out on the opportunity to travel out of town. And although that's not something that we want, I mean, there was a deliberate decision to purchase those buses. There was a lot of thought and a lot of benefits to buying them. But you know, if we had no other choice, if all 6 of our buses broke down, the kids don't lose out on those trips, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Nakata. That's correct.
I got one thing. So from the general, I guess what's already allocated for the regular buses, since the ESSER 3 is going to allow us to create that social distancing on the bus, we can use a general fund that's already there for those buses to assist with the student activities buses, correct?
Yes, sir, that's a possibility. That definitely is a possibility that we can look at. I think once we get started with the year, we can see how we allocate these ESSER 3 funds.
Point of
And then from there-
clarification. Mr. Ressa, I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said the current budget did not include any money to purchase new buses.
That's for exactly. It did say that with respect to transportation buses. I think what Mr. Barrera was referring to, is it possible for us to reallocate funds? That's something we'd have to look at.
Yeah, 10
I know-
buses rolled over from,
Yes, sir. We have 10
so you are-
buses. We have certainly funds budgeted this year for 10 buses that we can roll over. And we're working with the transportation director to be able to get quotes on those particular buses. So if need be, if it's the board's desire, we can certainly look at possibly reallocating if that is the desire. However, please keep in mind that the activity coach buses are much more expensive than a regular bus. So we'd have to see how many buses we can get with that. But it's something we can certainly look at, sir.
Good, thank you.
I have one more question. I'm sorry.
No, it's
Give me
okay.
enough time.
No, it's okay.
I'll think of more. Mr. Dessa, what is the largest line item, budgeting-wise, as far as expenses goes for the school district?
You know, I would think that off the top of my head, other than salaries, because you're talking about non-salaries, right?
No, sir. You just
Ben-
answered my question. It's
Okay,
salary.
Salaries are at 85% of our budget, and actually, our budget that we're going to adopt is actually 86%, is salaries and benefits. That's the largest line item. So when you look at that, you got 14%, that remaining of that budget, that is for supplies, staff development, tutoring, replacement of buses. It doesn't leave that much to be able to utilize for our non-salary items.
Assuming that we don't get funding from somewhere else, like the ESSER 3 when it comes through, and that's exactly as anticipated in most human resource intensive industries. It is. I happen to work in healthcare, and that's our biggest budget line item too. Probably around the same proportion, 80, 85, 88% of the total budget does go to salary and benefits. So I anticipated that would probably be your answer. No more questions, sir. Thank you.
do we have a motion?
We need a motion.
Do we have a
Motion to approve.
Everybody can
Second.
Everybody got fell asleep.
Motion to approve the 2021-22 school district budget is presented by administration. Mr. Dessa.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion to approve by Mr. Nahara and a second by Mr. Barrera to approve the item as presented. Any further discussion?
I just want to point out again that, Mr. Morales, considering if things were to change and that presents an opportunity, then certainly down the line we can reconsider items. But I know there's a close association right now between the tax rate that we've just proposed and approved, the budget that sits here before us right now, in addition to the assumptions that you've made, across the board. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I do want to thank Mrs. Olson and her staff, as well as the cabinet and the interim superintendent on this endeavor. So,
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Ressa.
Mr. Ressa.
You'll be back here, right? It's
Yes,
just a
sir.
second. Huh. Item 7C, consider approval of adoption of policy CDA local.
President Morales, Interim Superintendent Carmona, members of the board, the Public Funds Investment Act requires the governing board to review and approve on an annual basis its local investment policy, CDA local. The policy is hereby submitted for your review in your budget booklet on pages 301 through 304. And please note that it is the same policy that was approved last year and it has not changed. Just for your information, the policy lists the investment authority, the approved investment instruments, the primary goal of the program, which is the safety of the principal, as well as outlining the strategies for the various funds. This policy requires that a system of internal controls be established to protect against losses of public funds arising from fraud, employee error, and other factors. It requires the administration to provide the governing board with a quarterly report of the status of the district's investments, as well as a comprehensive year-end report, which we do usually around August and September. And finally, it requires that it be reviewed, and that when it is reviewed, that it has to be documented. And so consequently, what you have is a board resolution after the policy to be signed by the board officers stating and documenting that the policy was reviewed by and approved by the board. So are there any questions on the policy you submitted?
Motion to approve.
Second.
The motion was made by, I believe, Mr. Paul Guerra, and a second by Mr. Michael Nahara. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 7D, consider approval of resolution listing current brokers, investment pools, and investment training sources. Mr. Tony Reza.
Yes, President Morales, Interim Superintendent Carmona, and members of the board. Again, the Public Funds Investment Act requires the governing board to review and approve the list of brokers and investment pools that it has used during the year, as well as independent sources for training of the district's investment officers. The brokers, investment pools, and training sources listed on page 307 have met all the requirements of the Act, and the resolution will ensure that we have documented this review and approval. Are there any questions on the board resolution?
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion made by Mr. Michael Nahara and a second by Mr. Paul Guerra, I believe. Mr. Guerra, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marissa. Item 7E, that would be I'm going to present that. Consider approval of the 2021-2022 board meeting calendar and agenda cycle. As in the past, the board meeting calendar was developed using the third Tuesday of the month for the regular board meetings, with the exception of December 2021. We are proposing the second Tuesday due to the winter break, and March 2022, we are proposing the fourth Tuesday due to spring intercession.
Calendar's pretty consistent with what we've done before. Motion to approve?
Second.
We had them both the same tomorrow. I'll ask. A motion was made by Mr. Michael Nahara and a second was made by Mr. Eddie Mena to approve the item as presented. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. The final item, 7F, consider approval of delegate and alternate for the TASA-TASB Convention Delegate Assembly. Delegates and alternates in each region will meet with the TASB directors to discuss the issues coming before the assembly and to clarify delegate and assembly processes. At this time, do I have any nominations? Do you have anybody?
I nominate our board officers, our president as delegate, and vice president as alternate.
We have a motion by Mr. Michael Nahara to nominate myself, I believe, as a board president, and Mr. Eddie Mena as the.
No, sir.
No. Mr. Castellano as the alternate. At this time, we have to approve the item as presented. Are there any further discussion on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. Item 8, executive session. The board will break its time for executive session. The time is 8:10.
No, no, you have to
Sorry.
read it.
The meeting is to be closed for consultation with legal counsel to receive an update on TEA investigation and to discuss personnel and real estate matters under Texas Government Code Section 551.071, 551.072, and 551.074. The time is 8:11. We're back from executive session, and the time is 9:25. No action was taken, and at this time, I'd like to adjourn. Time is 9:25.